What's up, YouTube? February 10th, 2023. Okay, so yesterday I posted a video. I did say that I was going to make the recording that I'm doing now. I had said in that video that I was going to post it on the same day, but I did not. Okay, I said I was going to. So basically, in other words, I said I was going to post it yesterday, but I didn't. So I apologize. But anyway, moving on. What I said it was going to be about is what it's going to be about. Okay. Continuing on to this recent video, to this document I used in a recent video. There was a recent video in which I talked about this. It's a very recent video. And yeah, I mean, you could read this if you want. You can watch the video or you can just read it, what's said in the text in this. But basically what I was doing is I was giving the ultimate, what I thought was the ultimate diagram of something I had been talking about many times throughout the past few months on my channel. But the thing is, it's actually, it's almost there, but it's not quite the ultimate diagram. Because here's the thing. I can only really show you perfectly what I've been saying in this Google document if I interact with the diagram as if it's a simulation, rather than just show you what it is and then have words to go with it. Because that's the only way I can make it more obvious, more clear. I already made it very clear in the many videos I made about it prior to the first video in which I used this document. But then I took it a step further and made this document with all these words in the diagram, and it still wasn't enough. So now I have to take all of that combined, or really just this document, because it pretty much sums up what I was saying in those videos. And and now I'm going to take all of this, and I'm going to try to my very best here to interact with the diagram to show you exactly what I'm saying, so that there's no misunderstanding. There's no more panicking about this or that. Just literally just showing exactly what I'm talking about. I'm not leaving any room for misinterpretation. That's what I'm trying to say. Notice that in the line there cannot be an infinite amount of particles. That's the part I want you to focus on starting off. That's why it's at the top, okay? I put that there at the top as the first sentence because that's the first step in understanding this. You know, I might even just make this even easier on top of that and just write numbers for each step to help people because my viewers clearly have a very hard time maintaining awareness or maintaining the just learned idea in mind that I'm giving, even if they pause it. So technically I can classify certain parts of this as just like steps. So yeah, so the reason I say that somewhere along the path there'd have to be skipping the process of movement. When I say there'd have to be, I meant the atom or whatever particle. I'll just say the atom would have to be skipping the process of movement. So when I say the process of movement, I mean, you know, when all movement is a process. So if an atom moves from point A to point B, and that's, say, 5 meters, and let's say it is 5 meters in this diagram, or let's say it's 5 centimeters, well, then that's still movement. But my point is, this takes me to the next point. Travel itself is a logical process by the laws of logic, okay? And that easily classifies all of space and the laws of physics as somewhat paradoxical, just as I've been arguing for so long on my channel. what I said there, that it's classified as a paradox, it only is when you take that and when you take the fact that travel itself is a logical process by the laws of logic. And when you take that, not on its own, that doesn't prove this is a paradox. But when you connect that to the other things I was saying, it's easily what I've been describing here is easily classified as a paradox. So look, in the line there cannot be an infinite amount of particles, right? No matter how tiny, you could go super tiny and you can reach the quantum scale. Like I said, let's say point A is the atom, and then it travels in a straight line to reach point B. Let's say it traveled 5 centimeters. Well, point A is its starting point. Well, in between point A and point B, you could say that's 5 centimeters. And it actually is 5 centimeters, but you can't fit an infinite amount of distance into 5 centimeters. And so there must be some parts of traveling that don't involve any centimeter or any distance. So how can you get from point A to point B with the fact that some parts of the path have no distance to it? You get what I'm saying? Some part of the path of this 5 centimeters that the atom started at to point B, there can't be, and the reason why is because there's not an infinite amount of parts or particles. That's because particles have to travel inside of other particles to travel anywhere. Space itself is made of particles, so every distance that's traveled, it's all every bit of space, every distance you travel, you're traveling through particles. And if you're not you can't travel in what isn't a particle. It's impossible by the laws of physics, and it's impossible by logic. So that's why, the atom starting at point A, it does travel through particles, particles. It travels through particles that are external to it, that just stay where they are from point A to point B on this path, this tiny little path. There's a bunch of other, points and micropoints, and then you reach the quantum scale. But you can't go infinitely tiny. There isn't infinitely tiny, and it's because there isn't that the atom actually doesn't move from point A to point B. It actually has to teleport. It can't actually. There's some points where to get any further on the path, you have to just stop moving, and you have to magically teleport, because quite literally there can't be an infinite number of points or stops on this in 5 centimeters. So if it goes in a straight line and then it reaches a stop where it can't go any further because there's no more path, and that's really what it would be, then it just would have to teleport to the next point. Let's say, I don't know, like, I don't know. You can't draw anything on this Google Docs. It's so retarded that they don't have anything like that. But there's no way for me to draw this really. But my point is, just look at where I'm zoomed in on, right? Point A is right where it is. Now just move a little bit to the right. There's not an infinite amount of particles from point A to the little bit amount I said you scroll the atom to the right. So if you only move that much, that little, there's not even an infinite amount of particles between those 2 points. So no matter what 2 points you put between, there's not an infinite amount of particles between each point. So how do you even get to how is it even possible for anybody to even get, or how is it possible for the atom to even ever reach point B? It does, but how can it? But the fact that it does, despite what I'm saying being true, just shows that that's a real paradox to logic, not to Look, the laws of physics then must be, at least somewhat illogical, okay? I've been saying this for a long time on this channel. I've been saying this ever since I first made this video. At the end of the day, you have point A, and you have, like I said, you could, that little bit of distance, and even then it doesn't hold up because it doesn't make any sense by logic. I mean, because if you have to put the atom that starts at point A, if you have to put it in other atoms for it to even have anywhere to be, then that's understandable, but still mathematically, even if you do have it go from point A to any other point between point A and point B, it would, to even get to it, to move to it, it can't do nothing but move to get to it, because movement alone won't be enough, because there's a point where movement no longer movement breaks down, and it's not enough to merely move. You have to also teleport to even move at all, is what I'm trying to say, because like you would have to like transcend logic to even move between any 2 points, because there isn't always going to be another atom to exist in, because there's not an infinite amount of atoms in this 5 centimeters here. And so there's atoms across the line from A to B, but not at every point. And so that means that mathematically there must be points where the atom just teleports, instantaneous movement, and it's like beyond the process of time, movement, and logic. We don't see it, but we do it all the time. Every time we move from any distance, any one point to another point, it's just instantaneous. The only other alternative is that there is an infinite amount of particles within every particle, but that's just still, if that really is the case, then there's no total amount of particles in any particle or in any distance, which contradicts much of the evidence I've given to the contrary, and that others have given to the contrary. And so, ultimately, it just doesn't make any sense for it to be the alternative. They're both situations involve paradoxes, obviously, but it's less paradoxical in the situation I'm arguing for here, that it's just teleportation. If it's non-teleportation, then it's going to be very hard for you to argue that we do not teleport. You'd have to be saying that like on the quantum scale, you'd have to refer to the quantum scale, and obviously many people will believe they understand the quantum scale, or that or the quantum scale is perfectly logical, and so they say they perfectly understand it. But I've proven why they don't many times in the past on this channel and off of it. So, but at the end of the day, I'll give a quick little argument against the notion that it's not teleportation. I'll give a little bit of evidence. If it really isn't teleportation, first of all, how do you answer to what I was saying? Second of all, how do you even begin to counter argument the argument I gave earlier? Second of all, if it isn't teleportation, then why does it always look how can you prove that this is the case? How can you demonstrate that that's true? Given when we actually look at things moving, no matter what's moving, when we look at them move, how can you demonstrate that it's visually accurate to non-teleportation. Because if you all the time we're looking at things move. So if I see a car driving, right? Well, then clearly I see it moving. Now, I say it's teleportation, but remember, teleportation would not involve movement. So it really wouldn't look like, teleportation would not look like movement. But it would still involve movement. It would rely on it, and it would be something so important to movement that it would be the only way for movement to even be able to happen. Movement can't cause itself, even when it does exist. Even after it's begun to exist, it still can't cause itself to exist when it's existing. So it has to rely on some kind of other thing that does not actually happen in physics, which is obviously something that is not involving consistency with any of the laws of physics. And I say anything within the laws of logic. So it just must be teleportation. Also, some more supporting evidence. How about the fact that teleportation is just instantaneous. It's not a form of movement. It's just it is now there. It is there, and now it is there. It does not involve. So it's almost like movement. What we know to be movement is actually just teleportation. And it always has been. We just misunderstood what teleportation is. Because of our misinterpretation of what we were seeing, and and humans have been easily deceived by certain visual effects. Like if a thing in the more back you go in history, and I've talked about this a long time on here, the more people misunderstood the laws of physics, and the more they misunderstood a lot of things, and to the point of there was literally points where people thought that people were literally doing things in sci-fi and fiction if they were moving really fast, or if like a person if a thing moves so fast, they would think that it's actually a form of teleportation. They wouldn't think it's a form of teleportation, but they would think it's like something that doesn't rely on teleportation. So, okay, I am sorry, but I got cut off because of where I was at. So now I'm just installing the Sketchbook app just so that I can draw what I was saying. Anyway, as I was saying, if you drew it on the quantum scale, you could see that, there'd be gaps. There'd be gaps between each little, there'd just be an infinite amount of, I don't want to say an infinite amount of gaps, but there'd be a gap for every atom. For every atom, there is a gap for each atom. And so since all the atoms are connected to other ones, there's a gap between each of them in which there's no atom. So really the gap isn't even a gap. It's not anything. It's just what isn't space and what isn't a location. And so so you could draw, and I'm going to draw it for you just to run this home so this can't get any more misunderstood ever again of what I'm trying to say for my viewers. You go from point 1 to point 2 to point 3. That's what all movement is. All movement is teleportation. And people have understood that, except they've not called it teleportation. Most people in history have not called it teleportation, which is moronic because it actually is teleportation. And the fact that they didn't know that, and means they misunderstood the word terribly. And thus they misunderstood the meaning of teleportation terribly. I mean, to be fair, there are multiple definitions, but the best definition, the most scientific one, is the one I'm referring to, the one I've been describing that's so important to all of this. At the end of the day, here, just give me a second. Okay, I drew this real quick, but my point is teleportation is just what movement is. They're not different things. They're actually one and the same thing. But if you don't look at it on the quantum scale, it's very hard to notice that teleportation and movement are actually the same thing. So that's point A on the left and point B is on the right. And like I was saying, that's what it would be. It's like well, unfortunately, I'm stuck with these. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what more I can do for this, but okay, never mind. My point is, let point A be the starting point and point B be the ending point, and that's, let's just say it's all of this is 5 centimeters. Look, at the end of the day, the atom starts at point A, but each little line dash I put between point A and point B, that's different points, but there has to be gaps between, because there can't be there has to be some finite amount of atoms from point A to point B. So that means there has to be points in which there's no more atom to travel inside of. So if the atom has gone from here to here, then to go from here to here, it has to teleport. It can't traverse the gap through going inside of something. So basically what I'm trying to say is atoms don't always exist inside of something. Maybe you could even say sometimes they don't even exist in the universe. And so they kind of like go out of the universe here and there, and then boom. Same thing over and over and over. Rinse and repeat. That's what movement is. So my point still stands, right? There's a paradox involved, because first of all, an atom cannot go outside of existence or the universe through itself alone, or through any other atoms alone. So that's a defiance of the laws of physics, okay? And it's a defiance of the laws of logic, because there is no logical process by which a thing can go outside of the universe through itself alone, or through the laws of physics alone. So because the laws of physics and because atoms cannot make things go outside of the universe, yet they do that anyway, then it must be something external to physics and external to the universe, which is existence. And that is illogical, because that does not involve logic is consistency, and it's also non-contradiction. But this is a contradiction. The fact that they go outside of the universe is a contradiction to it's a contradiction to what is possible to be done within the universe. So that's why I believe that if it's impossible to be done within the universe, it is objectively impossible. In general, it's at least some kind of impossible. So therefore, and I also would like to say that the official criteria for what's possible and impossible, always has mostly throughout history been said to be that possibility is what what can happen, and it is but that doesn't mean it's everything that can happen. Some things can happen, but they don't involve any sort of process that happens within the universe, and nothing that happens in the universe actually makes what I'm showing here happen. So what does make it happen? And so it can only be something that doesn't have anything, that doesn't do anything that atoms do, something that doesn't do anything that physics does. And at that point, it's just a paradox, because if you're talking about something that doesn't do what physics does, and doesn't do what matter does, and doesn't do what atoms does, then what are you even describing? It's just a paradox. It doesn't make any sense. The only way you could argue that it is actually doing what physics does, that such a thing would be doing it, is if you're saying it's a God that has being. Now, I have talked about why God has being plenty on this channel. And again, I've flat out admitted in recent videos that God has being, despite being outside of existence, the universe, and outside of the laws of logic, but and beyond physics. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a paradox, because how can God have being given these things I've shown? How does he have being if he's not even within the universe anyway? Because he's not inside of a universe, but he's having being. But we know that atoms are beings. And we understand what being is by studying matter and atoms and physical things. So if he's outside of the universe, but he's still having being, but from as far as we're concerned, from the laws of physics, what the laws of physics show is that you can't have being unless you're within the universe. You can't have being unless you're physical. You can't be studied unless you're physical. So if you can't be studied because you're outside, because you're not physical, yet we're still studying God anyway, then how? How is that possible? So it's just a paradox. And yet these things I'm showing here, this teleportation, it comes from such a being. So it's very much paradoxical, because it's happening through a thing that can't even that isn't even physical, but still has being anyway. But again, as far as what we can demonstrate by the laws of physics and logic, to have being, you must be physical. So it simply does not make sense by the laws of logic, is what I'm trying to say. Because as far as we're concerned, being is having abilities, But as far as we're concerned, the only abilities we can possibly show that can happen is through what our study of matter and the universe. So if that's really the case, then how does God do anything if he's not even in the universe? How does he even do anything if he's not physical? Because he can't, if he's not physical, he can't move. So he can't teleport. If he doesn't move or teleport, then how does he even have being then? And if he doesn't move, he doesn't teleport, then how does he think? Because thinking requires movement and teleportation. It requires things being somewhere. There has to be a thing. There has to be things somewhere in locations, at locations. Like when we think, we see things, we hear things. All the things I was saying about thinking, thoughts, they're sounds, they are things you see. They're memories through the senses. But if God is not physical, then he is not somewhere. And if he's not somewhere, he can't use the senses. So he's not so how can you have being if you're not somewhere at all? If you're not anywhere and you don't move and you don't use the senses, then how can you possibly still work in such a way that you can, quite literally make judgments or think? Yet we know God does. So we know God does, and I've given evidence recently. Because for all of the universe and existence to happen the way it did, it would have to be through something that is actually a thinking being, not through a non-thinking being. So I've given great evidence of that throughout the course of my channel, but in recent videos I have as well. Quite literally, from point A to point B, from the atom to go from point A to point B, from point A to the first dash to the second dash to the third dash. Let's just start from the first dash, from the point A to the first dash. How does it even get there? How does it even get there without a God? And if the God really did make it do it, then it would have to be in the universe to do it. And even if it was in the universe, how would it even do it if it couldn't even grab it while in the universe? Because it can't grab the atom with its bare hands. God wouldn't. If God was in the universe, he would have to take on the form of some kind of physical conglomerate of atoms himself. But we know that atoms can't do that to other atoms. They can't, accommodate for this gap from point A to this first dash I drew, right here, between point A and point B. So how does God do it then? Even if he was in the universe, he wouldn't be able to do it. So why would he has much less of a chance outside of it? And there's not even an outside of it. There's just, you either just exist in the universe or you don't. And if you don't exist anywhere. So if he doesn't even exist anywhere, how does he even make the atom at point A even go from point A to the first dash anyway? He can't. He's not doing so through moving it. He's doing so through moving it, but he's not doing so through grabbing it. And nothing could do it by grabbing it. Nothing could do it by any process within physics then. Because the only thing that seems to make any sense by which it could do it would be their movement. But the very movement I talked about is the very process I'm showing. Movement can't cause itself. So it just has to be something outside of this process. From going from point A to the first dash, it can't cause itself. But it can't be... So if it can't cause itself, but God caused it, then how did he even cause it anyway? What did he do? So that's why I think that if he did make it happen, he didn't make it happen through any process at all. He didn't... He made it happen, but there was no logic involved. There was no... there wasn't anything involved. The only thing involved was he merely desired it to happen, and that's all it took. He only had to desire it, and then it just happened. Because nothing else would suffice, and even desiring it doesn't really make any sense to be enough. It just is. So, at the end of the day, I've quite literally demonstrated what I'm saying on here a number of different ways, but this is the best I have for now, and I think I've done a better job explaining it in this video than any other prior video. So I hopes are high for this one, but really this is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, share, subscribe. Bye.